right, well, let's move forward now back to my hometown. Today, Senate Democrats defeated Republican efforts to block $26 billion in federal aid for state governments. That prompted House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to tell on Twitter, I follow her feed, that her congressmen need to move back to D.C. next week. They got to come back to the Hill for a vote. Senator Judd Gregg, Republican of New Hampshire, not a fan of that bill. He joins us now from D.C. You're a former governor, and yet you say this extra aid to states in the middle of an economic downturn is not a good thing. Why not?
Because we didn't pay for it properly. It's going to cost add $22 billion to the deficit next year. We don't have $22 billion to add to the deficit. Now, it scores over 10 years because they've got some back-end tax revenues here that they're claiming on the 5th through the 10th year. It scores as a zero, but we know when you get out there that something else will have happened by then. And we know what will happen next year is they're going to add $22 billion of new deficit, more debt. And really, that's not a good way to manage your house. And we've got enough problems around this city already without adding another $22 billion to our deficit and our debt next year.
Well, let's talk about the Bush tax cuts, because obviously that is sort of the battle du jour in D.C. Secretary Geithner's talking about them. You, of course, support extending all of those cuts for now. But why not, in the face of deficits, let them expire for the wealthiest top two brackets? They're not paid for.
Because that's where because the energy, well, first off, it's not our money. I mean, it's a little different. When the federal government decides to borrow money from China and then send it to the states, that's a little different. You know, I mean, that's spending. But when you're taking money from the American taxpayer, which is their money they've earned, hard-earned money, that's different. And I don't think that we want to raise taxes in the middle of a recession. I don't think it's going to help this economy at all to do that. I think it will cause a further slowdown and probably reduce revenues even further because of the economic dampening effect it'll have on overall economic activity.
And yet we're talking about an income bracket that traditionally saves instead of spends.
Well, I don't know that that's absolutely true, but we're talking about an income bracket which is mostly small business, which is where you get your expansion in an economy. Economies don't expand because big businesses go out and start to hire. We're obviously seeing that today, where big businesses, large businesses in this country have very strong balance sheets. It's the first person on Main Street who's making money and functioning as a subchapter S corporation that decides to add a few more employees. That's where you get your expansion. And it's that person that, instead of being able to add a few more employees, is going to have to send more money here to Washington to be spent on things that probably they're not actually that excited about.
You know, Senator Gregg, it's such a huge bracket. I mean, it's obviously, there's a big difference between someone making $250,000 a year and trying to raise a family here in New York. They're clearly going to spend every dollar that they get, and somebody making $10 million. Why not do something new, something revolutionary? I mean, why can't you decrease the burden on someone who would be in New York, really middle class, and give the tax increases to those people making $10 million a year wherever they may be?
Because we're not a socialist nation. I just don't happen to believe that the way you create wealth in the country is by taxing the productive side of the economy and moving it to the non-productive side of the economy in a disproportionate way. Yes, there has to be a fair tax burden, and in fact, I put forward a proposal. It's called the Wyden-Gregg bill. It's a bipartisan proposal to totally overhaul our tax laws, take us to 3 rates. The top rate would be 35%. It would reduce taxes for almost all Americans, take the corporate rate from 35% to 24%, so we'd have more capital incentive. It's a really positive piece of legislation. It does it by eliminating a lot of the deductions and exemptions, which cause the playing field to be unlevel. And it's the first major overhaul in the tax area since the Reagan-Bradley tax reform actions of 1986. And Rod and Wyden and I think it's the way you should go to deal with tax policy.